Hey Roots, happy Wednesday. Welcome back to another online service. I'm glad you decided to join me this week. I hope you're doing really well at home. This has been kind of a crazy season. A lot of things going on that we absolutely didn't expect to be going on, but we miss you guys. We're planning things for when you guys come back, and I'm glad that you tuned into this week series. Another week in what to do when you don't know what to do. We're talking about the story of Joseph, and I'm going to try to keep it a little bit shorter tonight because I want you to catch all of it and be able to apply it with what's going on in your life right now. Our main theme tonight is when you don't know what to do, remember that your problems can position you for purpose. Listen, I don't know all of your favorite TV shows. I know we talk about it a lot in youth group, but some of you guys really love Stranger Things. There's different shows that y'all are really into. And I was just thinking through some of the things that I watched growing up. Now, I lived in a pretty strict house, okay? So, like, we weren't able to watch a lot of stuff that a lot of other people watch because my mom was trying to protect our souls and our salvation, which I'm very thankful for. But there was a lot of things that we couldn't watch. But some of the things that we could watch that we really enjoyed were like Family Matters. Stephen Urkel. If you don't know who Stephen Urkel is, look him up. He's like the first nerd character that got really popular in the 90s. Really funny show. Love that show. Another show that we really liked was Full House. And Full House was a show, looking back on it now, the premise is like really kind of weird, to be honest with you, but there's this family that lives in this huge townhome in San Francisco, and Danny Tanner is the father of these three girls, and they're all little blonde girls, and his wife is no longer with them, and so his wife's brother lives with them as well, with his wife and their two twin boys. And then there's Uncle Joey, who is another family member that lives there that's a comedian. And they all live in this house and they go through life together. And it's one of those feel-good, old school TV shows that just kind of takes through everyday life. But it was the first show that I remember, this iconic thing that they used to do where someone in the show would experience a problem or they'd be going through something they didn't think was fair, and the slow music starts and there's violins and there's this orchestra playing in the background, and Danny's talking to one of his daughters about how things are gonna be okay because family's here and everything's all good. And the music comes in and it's, there's a live audience in the background and they're all like, oh, how cute. And it's like, everything's always gonna be okay. It all always works out perfectly before the end of each episode. And so there's never a problem in an episode that they don't figure out before the end of the episode. It just leads you to think that the Tanner's life is this perfect, never have any problems type style life. And how does that relate to what we've been talking about with what to do when you don't know what to do? The story of Joseph seems to be nothing like the story of the Tanners on Full House. It seems like everything keeps going wrong for this guy. You know, the first couple of weeks we talked about how Joseph was the favorite son and his dad gave him a coat of many colors that made his other brothers jealous. So his other brothers beat him up. They put animal blood on his clothing, trying to pretend to their dad that an animal ate Joseph. They throw him into a pit. They eventually sell him into slavery. And then he goes to live in prison in Egypt as a slave. And it seems like nothing's really going right for Joseph in his life right now. We're talking about today we're talking about what to do when we go through heavy things that seem like, why is this happening to me? You know, a lot of times in our lives, sorry, there's bugs crawling on my feet. A lot of times in our lives, the first question we ask when something bad happens to us is not, what do I do next? It's, why did this happen to me? Why is this going on in my life right now? Why is this something that I'm having to deal with? Woe is me. I can't believe that I'm the person that's having to deal with this situation. I want you to think of the last time something happened to you that wasn't fair, that didn't go your way, and how did you respond to that? Putting ourselves in Joseph's shoes today, he was definitely someone who things were happening to that were not fair at all. You know, the first week we talked about how maybe he shouldn't have been, flaunting his blessings that his dad gave him because he was the chosen son in front of his brothers. But even still, even at that point, even if he was a spoiled brat, he didn't deserve to be thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and put in this position now where he is stuck and he has nowhere to go. He's a slave to Egypt. Not only that, but he's a Jew. He's not one of the preferred people in this time, and he's not being treated right, probably in this prison and in dungeons. And I don't know if you know anything about like really old biblical prisons, but they did not have cable TV, and there probably wasn't outside time, and they probably didn't eat, much less like prisoners today that get government cheese and other amenities. Prison was bad, y'all. Prison was a bad place to be. And not only that, he was a slave in prison. He wasn't just a prisoner, he was a slave in prison, which means he was even less than a normal prisoner. Joseph was treated wrong for no reason at all. Difficulties in our life often feel kind of random and pointless, much like Joseph's life, but to a different degree. Ours probably not as bad, but I know there's some of you that are watching this video that probably have had things in your life happen that seem absolutely pointless. Maybe it's your parents' marriage that broke up, or maybe it's, feeling like that everyone's always out to get you, that when you're in a classroom being silent, all of a sudden the teacher gets on to you because they think you're talking. And it's like, why am I always the one that gets in trouble? I know plenty of you can identify with that. I was that person too, just because I was loud and I could be doing what I was supposed to do and get called out and say, Max, quit talking. And I'd be like, I'm sitting over here trying to figure out division. I didn't talk to anybody. And maybe you identify with that. We've all been there before when we feel like we've had difficulties that make no sense, that don't seem like that we deserve it. And we just ask, why me? We've all had to experience that. So back to the story of Joseph. Here's a little recap of what's happened in Joseph's life to this point. Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers. He was taken to Egypt, where he was forced to work for a high-powered official. He was falsely accused of doing something he didn't do and was thrown into prison. And that's where we pick up. It seems like a string of events, one thing after another. Things keep happening to Joseph that are not his fault. And last week, we talked about even when bad things happen to you, we just have to choose to do the next right thing, even if we don't know what the outcome is. And this is what Joseph continues to do. He continues to get put in situations that are not his fault, that he didn't do anything to deserve, and he just chooses to do the next right thing. And that's where we pick up here. Joseph is in jail for a crime he didn't commit, and here he makes some new friends in jail. We're going to be in Genesis 40, 1-3 here for this first scripture. It says this: sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the same prison where Joseph was confined. Remember, Joseph was in prison for a crime that he didn't even do. He was there for Potiphar's wife, who wanted to get with him, and because he wouldn't get with her, now he's in trouble. He's sent to prison because she accused him of raping her because he would not concede to her hitting on him. And so now he's in this situation, right, where he didn't do anything to land this spot. He didn't do anything, a crime that deserved to have him put in prison. He was here innocently. And even in that really difficult situation, Joseph continues to honor God, even though it's one thing after another of Joseph being mistreated. We're going to continue in verses 4-8. It says this: after they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. They were upset. They were confused. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" We both had dreams, they answered, but there is no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. Joseph sees an opportunity here. Even in the middle of being treated unfairly, even in the middle of being persecuted for no reason for stuff that he didn't do, even in this time, he allows God to use him. He sees an opportunity for him to shoot the gap here. He says, God's given me this gift, right? He asked them what their dreams were. The men told Joseph their dreams, and with God's help, Joseph told them what they meant. And then what Joseph said would happen ended up happening. They tell him their dreams, and Joseph uses this God-given talent of interpreting dreams to be able to tell them what's going to happen. This amazing event. These two men that were once in power under Pharaoh in Egypt, they were the cupbearer, which means they were the people that whenever someone gave Pharaoh something to drink or something to eat, they would eat and drink it first to make sure that it wasn't poisonous, to make sure that it wouldn't kill the king or the Pharaoh, and then Pharaoh would take it from them and then eat and drink. They were very important people, very close to Pharaoh, some of the most important people in the time of protecting. Think about the CIA, the Secret Service, people that walk with the president to make sure that he doesn't get shot or assaulted or anything like that, that his security. These were who these people were. They were high level, they were important. And Joseph has a chance here to influence them with the gift that God has given him. And so he interprets this dream. And what he says would happen ends up happening. He did it the right way. The story tells us that the cupbearer forgets about Joseph. Even through this incredible event, even something so amazing that Joseph does, this cupbearer ends up forgetting who he is. He got out of jail and went on with his life. And over time, as Joseph was waiting in jail for his friend to remember him, he realized that not only did his friend forget him, but what he did to help his friend didn't even help his situation. I don't know about you, but sometimes, going back to like the situation in the classroom where your teacher thinks you're talking and you're not, and maybe there's been times when you're sitting in your classroom and you're trying to help someone with something that teacher is teaching, and then you get in trouble for it and you're like, I'm trying to help you. Have you ever been there before in any type of situation? You ever got in trouble with your parents because you were trying to help out and they didn't like what you did, so you got in trouble, and all the while you're thinking, man, I did this to help you. I did this to give you something good, and now I'm in trouble and I don't feel like I deserve it. We've all been there before. Over time, as Joseph was waiting his jail, his friend forgets what he has done for him. It didn't really make his situation better. But then 2 years later, I promise you, if you do the right thing, listen to this, if you do the right thing, in due time, God will bless you for doing the right thing. Always, always. He never forgets. But then 2 years later, Pharaoh had two dreams that troubled him. Now, the most powerful man in Egypt is having some dreams, and it's giving him some trouble. There's some night terrors. He's having some nightmares that are messing with him. And now there's nobody there to interpret these dreams. And so in this moment, Pharaoh calls for Joseph. The cupbearer remembers this guy. He says, wait. I met this guy when you threw me in prison, Pharaoh, and he can interpret dreams. And so Pharaoh calls for Joseph, and Joseph gets his shot. Under Joseph, Pharaoh calls for Joseph, who interpreted the dream with incredible accuracy for the cupbearer. And as a result, Joseph was made second in charge of all of Egypt. Even though he had been sitting in prison for years as a slave, what he did, the choices that he made that were right in prison, led to him being able to show who God was in him and with the talents and the things that he had put in his life to the most powerful person in the land. And it was so incredibly accurate that Pharaoh made him second in charge of all of Egypt. Under Joseph's leadership, Egypt survived a terrible famine, which eventually put Egypt in a position to save Joseph's family and other people from the homeland who were suffering in the famine. This did not make Joseph's life perfect. This didn't make everything right that had been done to him. Not even close. He's still taken away from his family. He's still struggling he's still subject to Egypt, a Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, his rule, and he still lost everything that he had before. Doesn't make everything perfect. But God is definitely blessing him in the middle of what seems like a massive curse on his life. When we see the big picture and understand the context to this backstory, we see that Joseph's challenging circumstances uniquely positioned him to do something great. The big picture here today, and I already said it, but when you don't know what to do, remember that your problems can position you for purpose. Even though you don't always know why you're in the middle of what you're in the middle of, you need to know that God is working. And that when you continue to make the right decisions, he can position you in the middle of your problems for purpose. I want to encourage you that in the middle of all this, there's been a lot of stuff that we've heard over the past week. Things that have been troubling to you guys, to our students. We lost a student this past week, and we're all asking questions of why this happens. And it seems like we're in the middle of a problem that nobody deserved, especially not that student. But I want to promise you that God is good, that he remembers, that he will not forget you, and that when it seems like you're in the middle of a problem that you can't get out of, he'll position you for purpose. We love you guys. I want to encourage you with that today. Stay up to date with everything that's going on Roots on Instagram. We cannot wait to see you again soon. We love you so much. Stay tuned. We'll see you later.